It is a small tropical island in the heart of the South Atlantic, Saint Helena, with almost 6,000 inhabitants. For the French and history enthusiasts around the world, the name of Saint Helena always associated with Napoleon. In 1815, after defeat at Waterloo, the emperor was exiled and deported to the island by the British. It was there that he would remain until his death in 1821. Saint Helena, an unwelcoming rock, a remnant of ancient volcanoes. So wrote the French novelist Victor Hugo, who had never even set foot there. Napoleon himself, on approaching the island, is said to have said, "It's not a very nice place. I would have been better staying in Egypt." And yet the fallen emperor had around him at Saint Helena a miniature court, never giving up his legendary status.
Napoleon
made the most of his exile. He orchestrated it to cement the last part of his legend.
So the story then of an exile at the other end of the world on a desolate rock. But in reality, as you'll see, that really doesn't do Saint Helena justice. It is a magnificent island, which could easily be a dream destination. However, despite a brand new airport, large planes still can't land there. Napoleon's last resting place and the inhabitants of the island still awaiting the arrival of tourists in vain. Well, Caroline Dumais revisits Saint Helena for France 24.
In Saint Helena, the French Emperor Napoleon lies in an unmarked grave. Halfway between Angola and the Caribbean, on an island fringed by cliffs jutting out of the sea. Seen from the air, Saint Helena looks hardly different today from the rocky outpost in the Atlantic, where Napoleon was exiled in 1815.
This is it here on the corner, eh?
Yeah.
2 centuries later, aeroplanes land on the remote island, but they are few and far between. The new airport of Saint Helena was completed last year, but remains closed to commercial flights.
We've been here 8 times. Comair came here once. There's been Atlantic Star, Embraer's been here. And then the King has been here. Yeah, it's a little bit more than 10, I think, because I think there's about 7 Falcons that have been here.
Today, less than 20 charter planes have landed at the international airport that cost more than 300 million euros to build. This is the biggest British investment overseas. But though brand new, it stands deserted. International aviation authorities say they cannot give the go-ahead for commercial flights because it's not safe to land here. The winds blowing in from the Atlantic are prone to sudden change in speed and direction. The project took more than 10 years to complete. Now, South African engineers are looking for a viable solution.
And it's a matter of just finding the right solution, whether it's to do with tailwind landings, whether it's to do with headwind landings and resolving the topography or changing the topography. That will be a call that the employer will need to make regarding that. But the airport is constructed, and do I believe it's a white elephant? Not at all. I firmly stand with the Saint Helena government that there is a solution, and we will find it together, and we'll operate the airport as a team together.
About a third of Saint Helena was cleared to construct the airport, and while waiting for a solution, life carries on as before for the rest of the island. 10 kilometers away, the capital Jamestown lies nestled deep in a valley between 2 cliffs. Its 17th century buildings are a reminder that this was once the domain of the East India Company. But Saint Helenians are looking forward to a change. Out in the street, it's a hot topic on an island with less than 4,000 inhabitants. A weekly flight of 150 passengers would be a boost to the economy. The Consulate, Jamestown's only hotel, has been preparing for guests.
And let's polish the brass.
Okay.
And then put the items back. But if you do them one at a time so that we don't lose the sequence.
Okay.
But the hotel manager says the airport's false start cost her a small fortune.
Well, last year in May, we were asked to please accommodate the milords and miladies and the cabinet ministers and the VIPs who were coming for the opening of the airport. We were also asked to ensure that we were adequately catered for, that we had sufficient food stocks, sufficient booze stocks, that we had sufficient staff, that we didn't let them down, and they were looking forward to this grand opening. And then suddenly we were told there's a problem with the airport. The whole airport opening has been basically cancelled. Prince Edward would not be coming. But in the meantime, I had all this enormous quantity of food and staff and booze, no way of paying for it, no way of storing it, and no way of selling it before the sell-by date. And I was told, not my problem, you should have planned better.
Those who were going to come by plane cancelled their bookings. The hotel is empty, and the islanders want compensation. They lost the season's earnings. As subjects of Her Majesty the Queen, they have complained to London. Saint Helena is still a British territory. With no planes landing, life on the island has resumed its old rhythm. It revolves around the sea and the yachts that dock en route to Brazil. The pace here only picks up when supplies arrive. For now, the only link with the outside world remains the Saint Helena, the last Royal Mail ship, which brings merchandise from South Africa. When that happens, the whole island rushes to the port to meet family or to board. The nearest island is Ascension. It is 800 miles away, but many Saint Helenans make the trip to go and look for work. The Saint Helena comes only once a month and has just 120 seats. A return trip to South Africa takes more than 3 weeks, and while they have grown used to isolation, Saint Helenians still speak of feeling trapped on their remote island.
Also, people living away from the island, they'd like to be able to come here for 2 or 3 weeks holiday, spending the least amount of time traveling. Whereas now, if you come for 2 weeks holiday, you need to have 4, 5, 6, 8 weeks off from work. And that's not doable for a lot of people, unfortunately.
Most locals cannot afford to travel. Their lives revolve around the mail ship. The Saint Helena should have been decommissioned this year, but was kept in service after the airport failed to get the green light. At the helm is a local who has done the island proud. The captain, the son of a gardener, Andrew Greentree, was born here. He took to the sea to support his family. But while he steers this old vessel full of the genteel charm of the British upper classes, he knows that development will come via air and not the sea. In less than 20 years, he has seen the population of Saint Helena shrink by half.
Since about 2002, and that was when we got our citizenship back, British citizenship back, people have slowly started to leave Saint Helena. And there was something that needs to be done in order to try and bring the people back or to keep the people that are here. And I guess the airport was probably the best solution to try and stimulate the economy. You know, maybe it would have been different if we had a big export from here, then maybe we don't need an airport and the ship could be much more viable. But at the moment it's not, because we bring all the cargo in, but then when we sail away, we take away empty boxes. Yeah. So, yeah.
The British government has asked the RMS Saint Helena to continue its trips to Jamestown. Residents remain dependent on the ship for everything.
Oh, thank you.
It is hard to imagine Saint Helena being overrun by tourists, though it is ripe with potential. Napoleon is the main draw card, and the island is far more welcoming than French history makes it out to be. It is volcanic, but the soil here is rich, the gardens are lush, and the temperatures mild. It is in this bucolic setting that Napoleon dictated his memoirs. This was his home, the Longwood Pavilion, where he died in 1821. In 1857, France bought the land. It has maintained an official presence on the British island ever since. Longwood is now run by the French consul. the director of the French domains of Saint Helena. The Foreign Ministry and the Napoleon Foundation have invested more than 2 million euros to renovate the property, an idyllic place when the weather is good.
When I arrived here, the place still had a somber atmosphere. There were tall cypress trees that made the house look like something out of Wuthering Heights. The wallpaper was left peeling off the walls. They had even painted some of the walls dark red to suggest the bloody side of history, the sadness of the place. They wanted to show the darkness of the house as it was described in his memoirs. But we've moved beyond all of that. The period of propaganda, of glorifying the past is behind us. Our approach has been simply to respect history and respect the site, not to add any layers.
He's in charge of 14 hectares of French territory. That includes the Valley of the Tomb. Resident in Saint Helena for more than 30 years, Michel Martineau has always placed great importance on the gardens that lie here. He recently planted symbolic crucifix orchids. Napoleon was in exile and not in a prison. He could move up to 20 kilometers around Longwood. And it was during one of his long walks that he discovered the Valley of the Geraniums. The path is still the same, but in 2 centuries the vegetation has changed.
A lot of more trees grow now. It's more dense.
When Napoleon was laid to rest, the valley was full of weeping willows. These days, it is a banana grove that hides the clearing where the emperor wished to be buried. The dense subtropical vegetation makes the upkeep of this memorial site a daily task. The residents of the island rarely visit Napoleon's former grave, but understand its value as a tourist attraction.
Well, the interest from outside, you know, that's what makes us carry on doing what we're doing today, because it is a lot of interest from tourists and even quite a few of the saints. They know how much money get made from the tourist business here, you know? It's just unfortunate that we get only a few tourist ships, like once, twice, maybe 3-4 times a year.
Napoleon hated Jamestown. In his memoirs, he likened the island to hell. The locals think the bitter emperor painted an unfair picture, and they hope that opening the island to the outside world will cast it in a different light. Not many foreigners come here. An estimated 30,000 tourists a year would have a huge impact.
Of course, it needs more infrastructure, but there is a hotel being built. There's currently a water shortage, so if we had an extra 200 or 300 people coming per week, then they would need to sort out, you know, some of these infrastructure issues, I think, and of course the food.
The authorities wanted to make sure that Saint Helena would have enough food for visitors. They encouraged farmers to produce more. This cottage was the home of Napoleon's companion, General Bertrand. It is used today to train local cooks. A South African chef is showing them the secret to making an ostrich hamburger.
Excellent. Just press them down. Basically, just before we cook them, we're going to keep them in the fridge, okay, so it sets it up a bit more. And then we're just going to press them down slightly as we put them in the fridge. So that's how big they got to be? Pretty much, yeah. We're going to work out how much the weight is once we... That's perfect. The farmers have been doing a really good job, and the local produce has improved dramatically. There's a load of farmers now. We've got the Joshua brothers who are doing tomatoes, cucumbers and lettuce. Bananas on the island has always been huge, so there's a lot available. In comparison to 2.5 years ago, it's improved exponentially. It's fantastic.
General Bertrand's home has been renovated and turned into a restaurant, one of the very few on the island. The director of tourism still has a lot to do before the big rush. For him, the delay with the airport has been a reprieve.
If it was so easy to go and visit Napoleon, half the charm would have gone, and they will have realised that it's taken us a while to sort out the airport, but they'll come, people have read about it, they'll realise it was a challenge, but they will come, they will fly in, but it will build slower than it would have done if the airport had just opened on that day. But I think they'll look back in history and say it was actually for the best that you had that chance to build, keep the mystery, people realising that although the world is a very small place, there are still huge challenges, like getting people to an island in the middle of the Atlantic.
There is another long-time resident who is taking all of this with the utmost serenity. Jonathan lives in the governor's garden and is a giant tortoise estimated to be 168 years old. He dates from another era, but is still going strong. A reminder perhaps that advancing one slow step at a time has been the secret of Saint Helena's enduring quaint charm.
Caroline Dumais revisiting Saint Helena for France 24. Well, that's all from this week's edition of the programme. Don't forget, of course, you can catch it and all the previous editions as well on our website. That's at france24.com. Thanks for watching. More editions coming up soon.